are you in a space to be prepared to explain yourself? Because the conversation is going to come up. You're going to have to talk about your access needs to people. I'm not saying you got to put it in your Tinder bio or anything, but just be prepared. Are you ready to do a little bit of educating or at least having people help understand you?
Hi, and welcome to the Autism and Black podcast. I am your host, Maria Davis-Pierre, licensed mental health counselor and the CEO and founder of Autism and Black Inc. Today, we have Charlotte Bachelor, who is a dynamic writer from Detroit, Michigan. She's a passionate advocate for the experiences of Black autistic women and girls. Diagnosed with autism and ADHD later in life, Charlotte began documenting her journey as a student at Michigan State University, where she earned her bachelor's in professional and public writing and a minor in African American and African studies. Through her powerful storytelling, Charlotte shares her unique perspective, drives change, and inspires action using her voice to illuminate and uplift underrepresented voices and untold stories. Enjoy today's episode with Charlotte and I. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Autism and Black podcast. We are here with someone who has a familiar face and voice within the Autism and Black community, Charlotte Bachelor, who was just a presenter at the 5th Annual Autism and Black Conference. Charlotte, welcome to the Autism and Black podcast.
Thank you, Maria. I'm glad to be here.
And we're going to get right into it. Your voice and storytelling are very powerful. I mean, your session at the conference was absolutely amazing. Can you share what led you to start documenting your journey and how your late diagnosis shaped your perspective in your 20s?
So I started documenting my journey because when I was on the path of late diagnosis, this was 22. So there wasn't a lot of information out there about late diagnosis period or late diagnosis and Black women. I think that was the first time I had heard of Autism and Black. I was working with a disability rights organization here in Michigan, and I really saw a need to fill a gap because there weren't people telling their stories that looked like me or came from my community. And I was like, if I have these questions, there are probably other people that do. So it just started out with me posting stories on social media, and people from my university will reach out and say, hey, I have a friend or I have a cousin, or how do you, find this or navigate that? So that's how I really found my niche. And as we progressed, so that was almost 3 years ago, now I see more and more Black women sharing their story, late diagnosed in their 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s. So I'm glad there are more of us sharing our stories, but there's definitely more work that needs to be done. And I think the biggest thing that storytelling does is take away stigma, and it takes away shame. People talk about autism acceptance versus autism awareness. Well, in the Black community, we're still working on that awareness part. We really are. So if I can come up and say, hi, I had an autism diagnosis at 22. These are things that happened for me that were good. These are some things I struggle with. If one person gets something from that, then I've done my job.
I love that. As a late diagnosed in my 30s, close to 40s, I understand exactly what you're talking about. I think I had gotten diagnosed maybe a year before that or so, and it was an eye-opening experience for me. And then just seeing that gap and seeing how we weren't even addressing that gap in Autism and Black, and how we had to start addressing that gap because it is such a different experience. I mean, being diagnosed as an adult often means rewriting a lot that you thought you knew about yourself. What has that process been like for you, especially as a young Black woman in her 20s?
I think making sense of it all has been interesting because there are certain traits that we picked up that were there, like the repetitive behaviors, repetitive interests. When I was really young, I didn't do really well in crowds or with loud noises, changes in routine, but also that meant kind of mourning relationships I thought I had with people who I thought were my friends, but really, weren't my friends, or people I had dated who maybe didn't have my best interest at heart. And people in my life were waving the red flags and being like, hey girl, you think this is, and me having that social gap in not understanding some of those social cues. So I think for me, there was a lot of like, do I wish I knew this earlier, but also knowing, well, what would have earlier diagnosis done for me, right? I went to a predominantly white high school. I don't think in the mid 2010s they were going to be quick to give out an IEP or a 504 to someone who is doing well academically. So I think it's kind of, I don't want to say worn in the past because, I enjoyed who I am. I enjoy who I am becoming, but it definitely put me, I think, in the right frame of mind. I got my diagnosis a semester before I graduated from college. So I think knowing this about myself and entering the workforce, being out in this great big world, I think that gave me kind of hindsight and foresight of what was to come and how to best advocate for myself. So it meant being honest with people I was friends with, honest with people I wanted to interact with romantically, being honest with my professors about things I needed help with or areas. So I would say it came at the perfect time because, I still had about 6 months left in this very supportive environment that I had at Michigan State University with the professors, being in a small department and working with a disability resource specialist who specialized in working with autistic and other neurodivergent young people. So I think it came at the perfect time for me to say, okay, this is your game plan. Now let's execute it in the real world.
I love that. And I love that perspective. And one of the things that you touched on a little bit and also touched on at the conference was the dating landscape. And I think everybody in the room and online at that time was like, oh my God, she is talking to me. Can you touch on what the experience has been like having to address that in the dating landscape? For me, I mean, when I found out I was autistic, I had already been married decades. So what, not that I'm old, y'all, but what has that experience been like?
So when I got my autism diagnosis, like I was talking to somebody, but it wasn't like super serious. And they were back home in the Metro Detroit area and I was at school. So it really wasn't like a real relationship. Like we were texting, but we weren't spending a lot of time together. And again, hindsight is 2020, me not recognizing some of those social cues that the words and the actions are matching up. So that came apart. Like I think the day after I graduated, I came home and got the sorry Charlie text and I was like, okay. But because I was going to be back home in Detroit and in the metro area, I was like, well, I want to date, but I don't want to be in like a medium or long distance relationship. I have roots here. So I was like, let's try this dating thing again, but now knowing what I know about myself. So there was one instance somebody kept saying something and I asked him for clarification. I was like, I'm autistic. Can you be very clear? Like, are we hanging out as friends? Is this just to kick the bobos around? Is this a date? And they thought I was being funny. They thought it was like a joke. And I'm like, no, like I'm serious. So I've been with my partner for the last 2 years, but I think part of that is because I was able to have very honest conversations with him about autistic traits and how autism shows up. And he was someone willing to accommodate me and willing to be very honest from the beginning. So I think, everyone wants to date. It's hard out here if you're autistic. It's hard out here if you're not autistic. It's hard out here, period. So I think just dating in your 20s is very messy. People are all different types of spaces and places and are trying to figure their own stuff out. And when you add disability on top of it, it can seem like a lot. So I would say I was in a secure relationship 2 months after I graduated college. And I would have been in a relationship for 2 years on July 8th. So it worked out for me. And I'm truly blessed to say that. But I think with autistic young people, it can be very hard to get discouraged. And I would say your feelings are valid, but also that dating in your 20s, sometimes you're not missing out on what you think you're missing out on. Sometimes being your own companion versus having something lopsided or half-baked, or you're questioning yourself, or you have somebody that's insecure and they're questioning your moves and preventing you from being with the person you want to be. So I can say it's complicated, but I think it's definitely a time for people to reflect and see where they are. Are you in a space to be prepared to explain yourself? Because the conversation is going to come up. You're going to have to talk about your access needs to people. I'm not saying you got to put it in your Tinder bio or anything, but just be prepared. Are you ready to do a little bit of educating or at least having people help understand you?
I like that. And I think that is great advice for those in their 30s, 40s, 50s, even navigating navigating the dating scene, because I think it's messy at all stages out here. So I think that is some great advice. I want to shift the conversation a little bit. Many autistic folks, especially women, navigate multiple diagnoses: anxiety, depression, ADHD, and autistic, right? What has your experiences been like with co-occurring conditions, and how do you manage them navigating everyday life?
So I have a bipolar 2 diagnosis, which I know in the autism community can be a little touchy because some people believe that there's an overdiagnosis of mood disorders, personality disorders. I'm not here to argue that. I'm not a mental health professional. I will say that the label based on my life, the label fits for me. And treating my bipolar 2, being in therapy, using mood stabilizers, having to do things like inpatient and intensive outpatient hospitalization when I've been in crisis has been incredibly great to getting me at a baseline, right? If my mood is stable, then I can address the irritation from ADHD, or the impulsivity is not being magnified by a manic episode. I can keep my routines. I can use my coping skills. I can better communicate when my thoughts are clear. So for me, I think treating the bipolar 2, because that's what flared up first when I was 18, and I actually had to leave school for a year to address that mental health concern because I was in a very dark and a very scary place. So for me, addressing that has helped kind of connect the dots. And I think it's like a Venn diagram. I don't think every mental health difference or every piece of anxiety is autism or is automatically ADHD. I think that's why we have different diagnoses and different labels to describe things, and people can be multiple things all at once. I also have ADHD, but I also have PTSD, and I also have a lesser known diagnosis of a nonverbal learning disability, which isn't even its own diagnosis yet. It's kind of a catch-all. We don't really know what it's about. So I think that kind of understanding, I don't want to say the root cause, but whatever is, the biggest factor in your life that might make that irritability flare out, that might put you into autistic burnout. I feel like addressing those first can help, and you might have to address those separately. So before I even thought I was autistic or ADHD, I was in talk therapy for bipolar 2. I'm doing CBT. I'm doing talk therapy. I'm practicing mindfulness. I'm doing breath work. I'm doing all of this stuff. And now, because I know, okay, I have bipolar, but then came the ADHD diagnosis, and then 6 months later came the autism and the NBLD diagnosis. I think kind of, like I said, identifying them as separate, but seeing how they all play into each other has been a huge portion, and not shying away from it and really embracing the diagnosis, because like I said, not everything is autism. It is in some cases, it is and isn't. So I think I do embrace those other labels to address, other behaviors or other things that I've experienced.
One, Charlotte, thank you for your transparency and sharing a vulnerable piece of yourself with us. I appreciate that. And then as a clinician, I think you actually really gave, words to what a lot of people experience. I know for me, my ADHD is a lot of the root of everything. And for me, it can exhaust me. And I know it's my ADHD, right? I say all the time, like, my ADHD be out here kicking me down, beating me down. And if I don't have my medication on the days that I need it, y'all wouldn't probably even know I was autistic. Like, the ADHD really be like, girl, it's a struggle. So I understand having to look at some of the root causes and how it can be this on one day, or how this can be something else. It's not always the autism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing that. And I think a lot of times there are such overlaps in diagnosis. One, because that DSM it works my nerves sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of research, especially when it comes to Black individuals and how things manifest and characterize within us. So I do know that there are so many overlaps. And when you don't have a clinician who understands, they're not able to address things. So getting other diagnoses can be difficult. But the fact that you have your bipolar 2 diagnosis, your autism diagnosis, your ADHD diagnosis, and it gives you clarity on who you are as a person. I just think that, that is an added benefit a lot of times. With that, how do you advocate for your needs when multiple systems still don't fully understand or respect the complexity of being Black, autistic, and managing co-occurring conditions?
Well, I think if the system doesn't recognize that we all have boundaries, right? Even if it's not a formal accommodation that comes from the schoolhouse or comes from HR, we all have boundaries. So a boundary I have is I'm intentional about taking time off. At my full-time job, we have a very, very, very generous PTO policy. So my coworkers like to say, I'm going to sneak in your carry-on bag because you always going somewhere. And when I go somewhere, I'm not reachable. The Outlook is off my phone. My Teams is out on my phone. So I'm not distracted. So I can focus on being my family, my friends, my partner, whoever. But also I might wake up on a Thursday and be like, well, I feel awful today. And I might just text my boss. I don't go into great detail, but I might be saying, hey, I'm under the weather. I'm going to be offline today. I'll be back on tomorrow. And I'm going to use my sick time. Or maybe I'm in a flare up and I need to get work done, but I don't have the energy to put on real people clothes and go to the office. That's what working online is for, and the work laptop. So for me, especially as somebody who is early in the workforce, my first job burned me out so bad. And I had to it took 6 months from me leaving my first job to the role I'm currently in to really sit and evaluate what I needed out of a workplace, because I came from a prior workplace where I was getting clocked for taking sick time.
Oh, wow.
When I was getting clocked for taking sick time, and I worked in events with children in the public, and I'm coughing and can barely talk, and I'm at the office hacking, and my coworker's like, well, didn't you see the memo? HR said stay home. Well, yeah, HR said stay home, but my boss is tripping. So I'm like, I guess I gotta come in and bring my Kleenex and try not to cough too much. Even like in the office space. So I work in a suite where I have my own office, and sometimes accommodations are just simple. I was talking to my coworker. I had that big fluorescent overhead light. I was like, yeah, I get migraines. I don't really like the big light. He was like, oh girl, I got a lamp at home I don't use from when I move. I'll bring it in. We didn't have to have a whole disclosure about sensory avoiding versus sensory seeking. It was just, hey, I need a smaller lamp. And oh, I have one at home. It's as simple as I have a whiteboard in my office, or I have a desk calendar where I can write things down, because if I don't write things down, I won't remember them. Or if it's not in big black bold letters that, hey, you need to have this done. I think just having those boundaries. Also, I don't take emails after 5 o'clock. I don't take calls after 5 o'clock. And thankfully, I'm in a workplace where I don't have a lot of quote unquote emergencies after hours. But after being on my first call, I don't want to start 7:30 a.m. with somebody yelling in my ear on this work phone. And I still got to work a full day. I'm sorry, I just can't do it. So I think that is one way in which I accommodate myself, or even with like my speaking and the freelance work I take outside of my 9 to 5. I don't always have a client, because some seasons it's time to rest. Like summertime, I just got back from Toronto. I'm going on a cruise to Mexico in 2 weeks. I need time to myself. So really learning those boundaries, that has been the biggest thing for me. And knowing what your boundaries are and how people can accommodate them. I think that's the biggest thing, especially because disclosure in the workplace is a whole thing in and of itself. And I was somebody in my previous workplace who was outed as disabled. I did not disclose. My supervisor found out by using the institution's Instagram page to look on my Instagram page. So again, I have talked openly about this being disabled, but it's also not a press release. And even after that, things were not better or more accommodating towards me. So again, I'm not an HR professional. There are people out there who can talk about that. I'm not telling you to disclose or not disclose. I'm just saying, do what's in your best interest. Just be cautious, be smart. It's a lot going on out here in these streets with discrimination of people, discrimination of disabled people. So these are ways I accommodate myself without having to bring in HR or having to make it bigger than myself. And I still get my work done. My performance reviews are glowing, but that just goes to show letting people work in their own way and have their own systems and not micromanaging people. People can be successful and have fulfilling careers.
I love that. And I think it also shows businesses that it's not that difficult to accommodate somebody, and you don't have to disclose, because you're, like you said, you got the lighting situation handled very simple. Like, oh, I got that. I can help you out. And then we're done with it. It doesn't have to be something that is so big and, we have to go talk and do this and do that. It can be something as simple as giving me a different lighting choice, having flexible workplace policies, making sure that I can take off when I need to, but I'm still going to get my work done. And this is how I thrive. So thank you for sharing that, because I think it shows businesses that it's not as difficult as some of them make it seem.
I think that said on average, most accommodations are under $200.
Yes. Seating, lighting, letting me work from home. Things of that nature is so simple.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about joy and Black autistic joy, because I know I see joy as a form of resistance, especially in the current climate where we are, especially when a lot of individuals, especially now, see disabilities as such a deficit. What does Black autistic joy look like for you, and how are you creating spaces for it?
I think for me, it means to hold space for my interest and engage in them on a more regular basis. So I collect vintage fashion, I collect Hello Kitty and Sanrio. My background is up right now, but I have a ton of like figures and stuff like I pick up at Comic Cons and antique shows. And that's something I do with my boyfriend. We do a lot of engaging in media I like. So like watching anime, a huge Star Trek fan, Star Wars fan. I got to go to Star Wars Land at Disney World earlier this year. And that was pretty cool because I've been following the development of that for the last 6 years. I think it's making room for what I like, even if other people don't like it, because it's not about what they like. It's about what I like. And it might be like I have like anime figures on my desk at work. I have a whole bag I take with me to anime conventions and Comic Cons. And it's got like Sailor Moon pins in there. There's Sanrio stuff. There's X-Men stuff in there. I have like bag charms all over my stuff. I like photography. So I keep a photo album of Polaroids of like my friends and different people making content on social media. I've been kind of taking a break from it, but like making reels and making creative photo dumps and things like that. Just giving myself that little bit of joy, even if it's just eating my same food and going to my favorite coffee shop and getting a cold brew and pastry before work. It doesn't cost $1 million, but it also is helping me cope and helping me start my day off on the right foot. So I think kind of diving into what you are passionate about and what lights you up, even if it's not typical or what people would consider not for adults or childish or whatever, just engaging with that and engaging with other people who understand that you enjoy and are passionate about it. Not everybody is going we get it. It's not meant for everybody to understand. You might get looks in public. You might have a family member that says, oh, are you too old for that? Or, oh, that's for babies or, whatever. But I think finding whatever sparks joy in you and doing more of it. Like I said, even if it's just 10 minutes of writing a day, watching your show before bed, listening to music you like to stim to, letting yourself stim. I think those are all ways we can spark joy. That even though they're small and only take a little bit of time, if we do them more often and in the long term, I think they have a really great benefit and payout for our mental health and mental well-being.
I love that. And it is a form of self-care because it is investing in you. So thank you for explaining that. As we wrap up, what message do you have for other young Black autistic adults who are still figuring themselves out post-diagnosis?
You're not going to figure it out overnight. The way you feel today might not be the way you feel tomorrow, may not be the way you feel 3 weeks from now or a month from now. So it's a journey like anything else in your 20s. Nothing is static. Everything is changing. It's normal for your relationships to change with other people, with how you feel about yourself, with your family. It's kind of like people say like a second puberty, but now you got money and you have adult responsibilities. I think continue to look for community online. I think Autism in Black is a great place to start, joining conferences, joining the community. There are other great Black autistic self-advocates out there, following with them, engaging with them, but also just to give yourself grace because you're young, you're figuring stuff out. We all don't get it right the first time. There are plenty of things we wish we would have done differently. 25, there are things I wish I did differently at 2021. And that's just a 4-year apart. So I think to embrace it as a part of your learning journey, but also seek out resources. If you know that you need job coaching or accommodations or vocational skills you're looking for, look for organizations in your area. Like if there's a Disability Rights Coalition or the ARC of the United States, there are statewide and local chapters. There are resources out here to help you, but you just have to look for them or just be willing to ask.
Thank you for that. And let the people know where they can find you, because I'm sure that they want to look into your journey, be there, ask you questions, hire you to speak, things of that nature. Where can they go to find you?
So the best way to get a hold of me right now is on LinkedIn. My first and last name, Charlotte Bachelor on LinkedIn. I am kind of taking an Instagram hiatus, but I am on Instagram at Charlotte Says with 2 S's on the end. That is where I post most of my content. So if you want to see other clips of me speaking or other talking about disability and autism, I'm there. Also, if you want to hire me to speak or hire me to work, because I do take freelance clients, you can email me at workwithcharlotteb@gmail.com. That's probably the quickest way to get a hold of me, especially during my little summer hiatus, summer break, because I do check my email every day, but I don't check LinkedIn or Instagram every day.
Perfect. And we will have those links in the show notes. Charlotte, thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Thank you for being a part of the Autism in Black community. I just want to give you your flowers and thank you for being so transparent with us today, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to be helped from this episode.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for listening to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast, and we'll catch you on the next episode.